Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, trust also in me. When everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Jesus said, come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. We gather today to celebrate the life of Kimball Bosma. It is my prayer, and has been my prayer for each of you gathered here today, God may grant us grace, that in pain we may find comfort, in sorrow, hope, and in death, resurrection. It is strengthening to have friends and loved ones, and on behalf of the family, I'm thankful for all those who are gathered today, for we draw strength from one another. Let us now turn our hearts to God in prayer. Heavenly Father, as we gather in this place to remember Kimball, to celebrate his life, we praise you. For those dear to us especially, we thank you for Kimball. You alone know what awaits each of us, and it is to you that we turn for comfort and hope. In this hour, we pray that you might keep us close to you. Free us from those things, those thoughts, those fears that entangle us such that we neglect to trust in your promise. Help us so to believe where we've not seen, that your presence may lead us and bring us at last into the joy of your home. I ask these things through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Hear now these comforting words from Scripture, from Psalm 23. We hear these words, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." In Psalm 46, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in uproar and kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice and the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the glory, and the power, forever. Amen.
Hello, everyone. My name is John. I'm Kim's brother, and I'll be delivering the eulogy today. I want to thank you all for coming and for expressing your condolences and for all of your support. Our family really thanks you, and we really appreciate the fact that you knew Kim, that you loved Kim, that you got to be around Kim, to benefit from getting to know him, and to tell us about your experiences of being with him as well. It's a great comfort to all of us at this time. We really want to thank you. So, for us, this is a time where we're sharing our grief and sharing the challenge of losing Kim for the present, but it's also a time of remembrance and a time of celebration, because we remember so many good things about the time that Kim was with us, and we celebrate and relive those times together. Many times since Kim's passing, we've reminded each other of a story of something good that we experienced from Kim, of his talents, of his music, of his life. And it brings us back to that time, brings that time forward, and gives us comfort and gives us confidence that as we move on in this world and wait the time that we rejoin Kim, that we will have him with us during that entire time. And I certainly feel, and I believe most of us do, if not all of us, that Kim is with us in the present today. And that's the point about actually celebrating and reliving all the good things about Kim's life. That for me is the most important point. And so for Kim, I think that celebration involves 5 things: his joys, his relationships, the challenges he overcame, the gifts he had, and the creations he made. So I'd like to talk just for a moment about each of those. As for Kim's joys, it's not simply that Kim experienced so many joys, and of course he did. So many of us know the enjoyment he had in his church, the enjoyment he had in playing music, all the incredible art that he created. But it's also the joys he gave other people through his laughter, through his sometimes odd observations that no other human being had ever said, sometimes through the unique experiences he gave us, and sometimes just through teaching us. And I know I go way back. I go back to when I was 3 years old, and some early experiences I had. The first, when I was trying to understand where people came from, babies came from, and animals came from, Kim took me down to a local pond, and he showed me some pollywogs in the pond. That's the first time I'd ever seen any pollywogs, and it was an incredible experience. And we weren't done with that. He explained a little bit more, and he talked about actually resurrection. And this is the first time I'd ever actually heard that word. It's a pretty fancy word for a 9-year-old, I guess. But it's the first time I heard it. It's how I learned what that word was. And I think it's obviously a permanent word today. We lived in Detroit at the time. It was a lot of kids running around being little rapscallions. And one of the things that Trixie and he learned is that you could take ants from an ant pile and put them in a bottle of water and drown them, and then put them back out on the pavement and let the sun shine on them, and they would wake up again, as if coming back from the dead, and then go on their merry way. And that's, maybe not the best thing for a 9-year-old to be doing, I'll admit. But that was really quite typical for our neighborhood where we lived. It's sort of rough boys growing up and learning to be men. And so he showed me that little trick, and that's how I learned the word. I recall this morning, that's how I learned what the word resurrection and being reborn was all about. And it's not like him as an ant, but it is like he is, in a sense, going to be resurrected and is being resurrected as a result of God's grace. That's certainly how I feel about it. So his joys are not only the ones he experienced through his music and his art, but the joys he brought us as well, and the fond memories we have. His gifts, well, there's obviously his music, his art, and his laughter, which came in abundance, and which we all remember very well. His creations. Many of us in our family have received works of art mailed from him, or in person, or we get tapes. I probably have a couple dozen tapes of Kim playing his guitar, rock music, folk music, just some incredible stuff. And I've been playing that stuff lately, digitized some of it, playing it in the background in our house. And it's really interesting. Our young daughters, who are 7 and 9 years old, can't actually tell the difference between the professionally produced stuff on the radio or on internet streaming, the hit music, and the other stuff. When I've actually changed over, they told me to change it back, which is really a pretty incredible thing to say. And then suddenly he'll jump in with and say a few words. So that's the only reason they really actually know. That's his creations. Now also his challenges. I think, puzzling a eulogy, how you address some of the challenges that Kim obviously faced. And for me, I turn to a book I read by a neurologist named Oliver Sacks. Here's what he had to say. He said that every person is born with a set of physical gifts and limitations. And who is to say that my perception of the world is any better than any other person's? And so Kim, it's true, probably saw the world in a different way and experienced it in a different way than most of us. But I don't think it's true that we would say his way of experiencing the world was incorrect. Many of the things that society might have said, well, that's not really the way we look at the world, would come out of Kim's mouth. But it really was unique, and you could see things in a completely different way from listening to him. And I think that that was actually both a challenge for him as he made his way in society, and also a blessing to those around him who were able to attend to that, to those sorts of things. And then really his creations. There are works of art that we have in our possession, and the love that he created, that will remain. It does remain. And for us, it will last forever until we actually rejoin him. And I'd like to really close with this. A little story. I just figured out this morning on the drive here, my little brother Roland, who is 14 years younger than me and 20 years younger than Kim, basically 19, 20 years younger. So here's the really interesting thing. Kim gave me a book that I treasure. It's a mindfulness book by a monk named Thich Nhat Hanh. Many of you may have heard of him. And he talks about being in the present moment. And what he basically said is the present moment is the only time over which we have dominion. The most important person is the person you have in front of you in that moment. And the most important pursuit at that moment is to ensure the happiness of that person. And for me, when I reflect on today and what this ceremony is about, Kim is present. Kim is present here today. And I want him to know that we all appreciate him, that we love him, and that we celebrate all that he has in this world. Now at this time, we're going to have some words from family. And they have some things that they want to say about their experience of Kim in his life. And we'll have a series of remembrances. I think, Lori, you were going to go. You can use the microphone over here. Was everybody able to hear that okay?
Yes.
Okay. You can use the microphone if you want. Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Kim's sister, Lorraine. The first image I remember of my brother Kim is a very tall, handsome young man with long curly hair, Levi's jacket, and slightly aloof, mysterious coolness. Back then, all of us kids together looked like the Brady Bunch. Kim was Greg, of course. A gaggle of kids with long hair and bell-bottoms piling into our red Ford van. Our dad driving us on cross-country trips. The kids squabbling and singing songs. Kim and John sometimes playing guitar. With our Dalmatian Leo panting and drooling on all of us. Kim began really to experience mental health symptoms sometime when he was a teenager. And was hospitalized in Stanton for a long time, about 27 years. During that time, he would usually come home only on the weekends. He would isolate himself in the rec room during visits, just smoking and listening to records. I always wished he would come out and be with everybody, but he would hide in there all weekend and then have to go right back to the hospital. But I did treasure the brief times that we did have together during that time. I wanted so badly to help spring him from that hospital. I studied social work at our sister Barb's suggestion, thinking that I could help him somehow get out of the hospital and live on his own. Because that's what I thought that was best for him. But then I realized at some point when I would pester the CSB and I would pester Kim, he just wanted me to be his sister. So that meant doing what made Kim happy. So my mom and I visited him in Stanton every so often, taking quick jaunts to the Levi's store, to Walmart, and to the diner. During each of these visits, Kim seemed genuinely happy to see us, but it was hard to have a break in his routine, so he always wanted to be dropped back off in a hurry at the hospital. After some time, Kim started taking a new medication, which was like a break in the clouds for him. He became much more present and sociable, and after a while he was okay with slightly longer visits, and sometimes we would go to Gypsy Hill Park with him, which was really nice. He continued to play his guitar and other instruments like he always did all through this time in the hospital. And he even managed to convince hospital staff to let him have his very own music room. He sent everyone in the family CDs of his music, beautiful hand-drawn designs and mandalas on the covers. And listening to the CDs was a treat because he would play pretty songs on his guitar, and then he'd stop for a while and talk about whatever was on his mind. He sent thoughtful presents to his nieces and nephews, like a steel drum and a tiny violin, and always remembered every one of us on holidays and birthdays, sending beautiful cards he designed himself with money tucked inside. Then in the mid-90s, he'd had 2 heart attacks from too much smoking and had to stay at UVA hospital for 2 weeks. This was really, really scary, and we thought we might lose him, but miraculously he bounced back, and we had him for another 20 years or so. Despite this, he did not stop smoking, and he definitely did not want to leave that hospital. But he seemed to feel happy and safe there with his music and his cigarettes, and to have everything just back off and let him be. He had lots and lots of friends at the hospital. I know this because I worked with some of the people who were discharged from here to the mental health agency where I work, who recognized my last name, Bosma, and they would say, "I know your brother, I know Kimball. He is a good guy." After 27 years in the hospital, Kim was finally left with no choice but to go out into the world, basically because the hospital was going to close down. This turned out to be a great opportunity for Kim. Although he had resisted going out on his own for so long, he made an incredible advance in his recovery. He went to work as a janitor in a thrift shop, moved into his own Section 8 townhouse that he had all to himself, complete with a music room and a closet he filled with 200 Hawaiian shirts. His house was an amazing, ornate palace, decorated imaginatively with items he found at the thrift shop where he worked and online. Every inch of every wall and even the ceiling decorated in elaborate detail because he was all about enjoying himself in his cozy home. He got a brand new driver's license for the first time at age 50 and bought a red Ford van, exactly like the one we had in the 70s. They decorated with bullhorns, fringe curtains, silk flowers, and bumper stickers that read, "Jesus saves," and if this van's a rockin', don't come in. He kept himself constantly busy, inventing and creating, using Facebook to post his guitar music, artwork, thoughts about love, faith, and insights uniquely Kim. There was a lot going on in that busy mind of his. He seemed so happy and industrious, having overcome so much without ever complaining. I never heard him complain about anything. And also I want to thank the CSB for that too. They helped him so much. When the rest of us managed to drag ourselves a long drive up or down or across the country to stand to see Kim on woefully few and far between visits, we always kicked ourselves for not doing so more often because it was always so much fun. He really knew how to have a good time, be creative, and make the most of his life. And he was always so happy to see us. We would all give just about anything to be able to have Kim open the door at his house again with his sweet smile and his big fluffy rock star hair, and give us a big hug and just have him in a visit.
I'm Boyd Bosma, Kim's father. I hope you can hear me all right. We, unfortunately, were in Asia, in Nepal and Bhutan, when we got word it was impossible to make phone calls and only erratic email messages. And I want especially to take this opportunity to thank Sue, Lori, John, everybody in the family for what they did. Yvonne, his mother, for helping move this process forward under very difficult circumstances. I'm still suffering a bit from jet lag, but I'm going to make this as quick as I can. I want to thank all of you for being his friends. And you had a chance, maybe more than we did in recent years, to see his virtues and contributions and his kindnesses, his honesty, and his intelligence. Kim was very bright as a kid. Unfortunately, his life experience was not what it might have been. It's not helpful to try to place blame, but to look for causes. And maybe someday our society will invest enough money in mental illness so we can deal effectively with kids and people who have the kinds of problems that plagued Kim. Despite that, he was optimistic, friendly, generous, and we've been hearing nothing but good things at this point, up to this point, since we got word of his death on October 3rd from a heart attack. I don't know what else we should say, except that we're very proud of the other kids and the grandkids, and we think they were all proud of Kim despite his difficulties, and maybe in part because of how he dealt so effectively with them. So I want to thank you all again for being here, and let's go on with the celebration of his life. Thank you.
Long before I was a bossy big sister, I was a annoying little sister to Kim. And the first thing that I know, the world I very first remember, Kim was my big brother. Grown-ups towered over me and said things I didn't understand. Barb had not yet come along, and when she arrived, she was not the smiley, bouncy presence we later came to know. She was a big white bassinet that hung from my parents' arm, way over my head. Kim was different. I had mixed feelings about that bassinet. Kim was different. He was first, and he was like me, only bigger, just above my eye level, smiling with those beautiful dimples, one on each side, and laughing and playing, and always, always protecting me as a little sister. Kim had a tricycle, and we'd ride round and around in the driveway. And I would get on the back, and he would go around in a circle one way. And he would go very gently so I wouldn't fall. And then when I had to stop, because I was getting dizzy or woozy or falling, he'd stop. And then we'd go around and around the other way. And we'd very gently pedal so that his little sister didn't fall. And then when I had to stop again, he'd sit me on the seat. And I didn't have to pedal, because he'd lift up my legs and show me that I got to steer, it was my turn, and put my feet up. And then he got on the back of the tricycle, on that back plate, and he pushed as hard as we could, and we went around and around and around until he fell off. And I was always safe. And then when he fell off, he did the same thing again, in circles, crazy and long, until he fell off. And that's what I first remember about my brother Kim. He would push hard, he would pedal hard, he would always protect me, and he would always protect his little sister. John made reference to a time that I don't think you even totally remember before we had bike helmets. When kids came home, when the streetlights came on, all of us, this was before we had seat belts. That's how old we are. We had a neighborhood that had boys up and down and back and sideways, and Kim was the leader of the bunch. He always protected me. I'm going to give you the short version of the story. That of him protecting me was the famous Kevin Bramble. We didn't know Miss Kevin Bramble because that was his name, and he took judo, and he was about a half a head taller than my brother. But my brother had some problems with him because he had little sisters, and we quickly renamed Kevin Bramble. And I'll blame this on Barb because she's not here to defend herself. She named him. She started it by calling him Kevin Bramble. So that became his name, and then no one could hurt a girl, so he would get in a fight with my brother, which he always won because he took judo. Well, then I would add a name, and Barb would add a name, and like I said, I'll make it short, but by the time we were done, and Kim was done defending us, Kevin Bramble was Kevin Bramble, and he became Kevin Bramble Baby Booger Butt. Kim fought a lot of fights with that judo champion, and he fought him, it can be told now, I'm sorry, Kim, on behalf of his little sisters. He always protected us. I was spared a lot of the wrath that he freely took on to protect me, and sometimes it was things that were of my own doing. One day, Kim was out there, and Kevin Bramble Baby Booger Butt started picking on him again. Now, I will spare you the details, but Kim won that fight. And that was the last one he ever had with Kevin. Kim had two best friends when we were in Detroit, Mark and Craig. They ran and played, they went back and forth in our 2 yards. We had the best climbing cherry tree you have ever seen, and those boys would go higher than I could possibly even think of, and we'd be down there going, no, you're gonna fall. They'd go, all 3 of them, up the tree. Then they'd come down, then they'd run back across our yard to the yard behind us, Mark and Craig's, and jump the fence into Mark and Craig's yard. They ran back and forth up the tree, back and forth up the tree, until that fence started to sag. And then it sagged some more. And they kept going. There was a corner post, and they would vault, they would grab the corner post, and they would vault over it until their feet were horizontal. You could see their toes pointing. They looked like an Olympic gymnast. That's what they were doing. Run, vault, 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 all 3. Then they would come back and forth and up the tree. Well, that fence finally got jumped over so many times it touched the ground. So the grown-ups came and put it up again. And that happened again, and it went to the ground. And they put it up again. I don't know how many times they put it up, but the boys kept running back and forth and doing their vault. And the grown-ups took the fence down. And then they just ran back and forth. I really think that was the happiest time of Kim's life. And I think if he were here, he would tell you that. And I think if he would vault the fence, toes point, really good, and running back and forth. In his lifetime, Kim Campbell overcame a lot more than a childhood neighborhood bully. He fought a lot of battles, some from difficult circumstances, some from wrong choices, some that were not of his own making, some that we just all is a part of life. This is what I want you to know about my brother. No matter what he faced, Kim struggled round after round in one direction, then the other direction, gently to protect others, then furiously to free himself. And I think he did free himself. He didn't always win. Again, here's the important part. When he fell off, he got right back on that tricycle, pedaling, pushing again in the opposite direction, round after round. When he mustered enough will and enough strength and that last ounce of sheer determination that all of us know so well, he finally won.
So I'm here with Love from the Garlock family and another sibling of Kim's, which is my mom, Barbara Garlock, who I'm sure is taking him on the most fun tour of the next realm you could ever imagine. And she loved poetry, and she loved noticing the things that bring life. And I think that's what poetry does. And I think that that's what Kimball, Blue Jade, Bosma's love of music and art did, was bring life. So I have a short poem from Rumi to share with you. But first, I'm going to ask, because Kim built such relationships and friendships in all the ways that he could with the people around him, I'm going to ask if everyone could turn to your neighbor. Everybody find a neighbor. Just find someone and turn and say hello to them.
How are you?
Thank you. And before I share the poem, I'm going to say that something that I have learned from my mom and from a relationship with the divine that she taught me and modeled for me, and that each of us are here to reflect to each other, is that in this moment of someone's transition, we get to let them know how loved they are. And that gets to help their soul heal all the more. And they, with no limits, get to let us know how loved we are. So this is for Uncle Kimball, and on behalf of my mom, Brother Kimball. Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and scared. Don't open the door of your study and begin reading. Take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. there are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the earth. And if I can ask each of you with your hand, just place a hand right here, is a big favor to ask for our friend Kimball. And start off with, just repeat after me and let yourself know this. I am loved. There you go.
I am loved.
And now we're going to send it to Kimball and say, Kimball, you are loved.
Kimball, you are loved.
And now turn to your partner, the person you turned to earlier, and say to them, you are loved. Thank you. Give thanks.
Okay, understand the time well. Any other family members? If there's anybody else any other friends who'd like to say anything, now would be a good time. And I can hear somebody coming now. I know you'll introduce yourself.
I will. I'm Karen Hall, and I go to this church, Linden Heights. And I just want you, the family, to know how I got to know Kimball. I would come into the cafe on Sunday mornings, and about 8:15, religiously, Kimball was coming through the doors to sit at the cafe, not only to eat, but to fellowship with us. He shared his love, and we accepted him with open arms. I want you to know that about 2 weeks before he passed, he was sitting about where the lady is in the orange, and I was sitting right across from him. And we have a time in our service when you can pray. And oftentimes we hear, Lord, help me. Lord, give me. But he spoke aloud that Sunday, and he said, thank you, Jesus. He did love the Lord. We appreciate Kimball, we appreciate you.
Anyone else?
If I could just make it, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
I knew Kimball for about 10 years. I worked with him. And he was kind of like an old hippie.
Yeah.
I probably have about 20 of them that he made me capes. He always signed it Kimball, Blue Jay sometimes, Bosma. One of the things that I noticed about him is that he always would like to go outside every day. That was nice, and he'd lay in the grass on his stomach. And he would come back in and he'd have 4-leaf clovers. And statistically, it's something like 1 in maybe 100,000 of you going out and finding a 4-leaf clover. Well, I found about 6 that I had in a book at home that I had kept them all. And when he'd feel like one person had got enough, he would bring it up and he'd say, I want you to keep this for so-and-so. And you'd write your name on the little sticky and you'd make certain that they got it. But he was just a really unique individual. Very honest, very pleasant, very attuned with nature. I really liked Kimball. And I remember some of the family, I remember one visit in particular, but I don't remember everybody's name, but he was thought a lot of. And I saw him at Goodwill. He did a great job up there. Just want you to know that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Pastor?
Thank you so much for sharing these memories. It's a privilege to hear your experiences with Kimball. Hear now from Romans chapter 8. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. For the creation awaits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. Kimball initially became connected with Linden Heights through our food ministry. Kimball would often make different crafts and bring them to the office when he came by. A number of those who work in this ministry invited Kimball to join us on Sunday mornings, and one Sunday, Kimball came. And from then on, he almost never missed. I'm grateful to hear this afternoon the different remembrances of your shared life. He was a son, a brother, co-worker, friend. As we gather before the separation that death brings, we're naturally confronted with the pain of loss. The sharing of these memories is a balm. Laughter, crying, that accompany these memories can be healing. It's my hope that they will be, and I encourage you to continue to share with one another. Paul writes, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with what will be revealed in us. I can imagine there was much suffering in Kimball's life. He endured, as was mentioned, a chronic mental health condition that hospitalized him for nearly 3 decades. This health condition rendered profound limitations. It is accurate and good to celebrate what Kimball overcame. On the Virginia Department of Rehabilitation Services website, Kimball's achievement in transitioning from the hospital was highlighted as a witness to the potential of the work of that department. I think it's good and right to acknowledge those in Kimball's life who worked with him to achieve this independence. It's good and right to recognize what Kimball himself achieved in responding to the challenge of these caregivers. It's praiseworthy and humbling to consider what was achieved. I remember early on in my time as a pastor, and I'm still a young pastor, but it's a few years ago now, when I was asked a question that has stayed with me these years. The question was asked by a man who, in the congregation, who was personally acquainted with chronic mental illness. And he simply asked, did I thank God today for my sound mind? Good health is often taken for granted. Paul writes about the present suffering. Suffering is only coherent because we understand or we're able to imagine an alternative. In Scripture, we find the connection between suffering and life is one that is asserted to be an unwanted intruder that is now present in life because of man's disobedience before the Creator. Paul does not mean to suggest in this passage that a particular illness is the result of someone's misbehavior. Rather, all suffering is at root the outcome of a creation that is now subject to the consequences of humanity's disobedience. In the Christian tradition, we make the claim that the world is not as it could be. We make the claim that the world is not as it should be. And we make the claim that the world is not as it will be. Paul writes of the longing of this present age for the desires that we have to be fulfilled. Kimball knew longing, deep, acute, painful longing. There were times where he hurt very intensely. Not simply the longing to be set free from his physical concerns, but even in his lucidity, Kimball suffered from the limitations we all find in this present day. And there's a word we find in the Bible to name this pain. Pain that comes from broken relationships, word is sin. In the Bible, we find that the word sin describes more than a catalog of behaviors, but sin is the condition of a broken relationship with God. Even at our best, even in the relationships where we most intensely desire to please and to be pleased, that desire is directed in flawed ways. Sometimes these flaws are the result of willfulness. Sometimes these flaws are from ignorance. Sometimes these flaws come from our own fearfulness. But no matter the reason for the flaws, they have a very real impact upon our relationship with one another. They stunt our ability to love and to be loved. Paul acknowledged the pain and hurt of this present age, and yet he was a man of hope. He had a hope rooted in the person and work of Jesus Christ. It was not simply the person who's hostile to overtly religious claims who find themselves unacquainted with the hope of which Paul writes. It may even be people who are inclined to affiliate with the Christian community who nonetheless find the comfort offered in the wisdom of the world to be the natural place to turn in times of intense healing and intense hurting. There is much wisdom in our present age. Focusing on good memories is good advice. Embracing and cherishing the time we have together, good advice. Taking each day, celebrating it, is good. But all of those things can be offered without any consideration of the person and work of Jesus Christ. Death fundamentally presents us with a reality before which we are powerless. We stand before death not only as people who grieve, but as people who will die. Paul's hope is in the resurrection, that death is not the final word. Hope can be wishful thinking. It's one of the possible definitions for the word hope. It's a way the word is commonly used in English, in fact. But that's not the only definition of hope. I hope you'll permit me this personal illustration. I grew up in the city. Not Detroit, but a city not unlike Detroit, San Francisco. And often we would take the bus places. And sometimes I didn't know which bus to be on. And I'd have to trust somebody who told me which bus to catch. Many, many times I have gotten on the wrong bus. Not because I didn't hear correctly, but because as I was awaiting at that bus stop, I started to doubt. Would this bus really come? Did I hear the number correctly? What Paul models for us is waiting on a particular promise. We find in the Bible that Jesus' life did not end on the cross. When his followers went to his tomb on the third day, they found it empty. They held the grave clothes. They encountered the risen Lord. They touched the wounds of his body. And they proclaimed, and we proclaim, the resurrection. I'm told that Kimball's Bible was marked to Matthew 22:36. The question asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? What does waiting on this promise look like? I think it looks very much like Kimball's life as I knew him. Hurting, struggling, and yet looking to Jesus. It's not that one in our life denies longing and suffering, but one finds oneself turning to Jesus for healing. We see throughout Jesus' life that often those who responded to him were those like Kimball who knew most acutely in their experience of life that they needed help. They heard the invitation, "Come to me, all you who are weary and carrying heavy loads, and I will give you rest." May we place our confidence in this promise. The promise that Jesus offered, "I go to prepare a place for you, and where I am, you too may be."
Before I start this song, I just want to echo what has been said up here. Thank you all for being here, for celebrating Kim's life with us. And know that if you find yourself suffering, there is someone out there who can help you heal those wounds. Led us from our chosen home. Well, I was lost, now I can sleep the hours that I don't weep, when all I knew was steeped in black and cold. I was lost. Keep the earth below my feet, for all my sweat, my blood runs weak. Let me learn from where I have been. Keep my eyes to serve, my hands to learn. Keep my eyes to serve, my hands to learn. So I was still, I was under your spell, when I was told by Jesus all was well. So all must be well. Just give me time. You know your desires and mine. Wrap my flesh in ivory and entwine. For I must be well. Keep the earth below my feet, for all my sweat, my blood runs weak. Let me learn from where I have been. Keep my eyes to serve, my hands to learn. Keep my eyes to serve, my hands to learn.
For all my sweat, my blood runs free. Let me learn from where I have been. Keep my eyes to serve, my hands to learn. Keep my eyes to serve, my hands to learn.
Receive now this closing prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, as we depart this day, we thank you once again for Kim. Thank you for his life. Lord, I pray your blessing upon the family, for those who will be traveling, for those gathered here today as we go forth. May our lives give witness to the hope we have in you. It is in Jesus' name that I pray.